The next step we're going to take a look at is adding in our beams and working in the model, learning some other tools. For this, we're going to start by looking at editing our members. So we added in our columns by using the column add, but let's say we maybe added one in there incorrectly. To edit a column, I can do one of two things. I can double click on the member line, and we can see that brings up our column edit window. Or I can browse and find it here in our model tree and see which one it is. Again, if I zoom out, it should highlight the one that is selected. So if we take a look here, we can see it is selecting the one at AN1. Right now, because everything's turned to stick, that is kind of hard to see. So I'm going to go ahead and hit SA on the keyboard to turn that all to solid. Then I'll select C_1 member 1. We can see it's highlighted there. Again, I can just double click on that if I need to make a change to that. Or if I just select that, I can right click and select edit. And we can see that also brings up our column edit window. With this being the case, I can go in and make any changes I would need to in here, whether that's section size. I could set the piece mark, which I would suggest not setting here because that would make that a user piece mark. We'll get into that later. Next, you can set your steel grade, the sequence, the erection pinhole, the rotation, whether the toe direction is in or out, where the long leg is, if this is double material, if the column is sloped, galvanized, or if it's broke apart. Below this, we have our information tab, which we can expand by clicking on that. Then we have our member, and we have our bottom end and top end settings. We can specify our end elevations for both the bottom and the top end. We could go in and specify any minus dimensions or material setbacks if we're adding a standard detail to this, and then our connection type. We could continue going through this, but we'll take a look at some of this a little bit deeper once we start adding our beams. So I'm going to hit cancel here. And then to delete a member, there's really two ways I can go about doing this. I can just select the member, and I can hit the delete key, or I can just select the delete icon. Once I select that, it's going to ask me if that's what I want to delete. I could say yes, but in this case, I'm just going to select no. So we're going to take a look at adding our beams. Let's start by adding in our second floor beams. For this, we're going to go ahead and open up sheet S1. So I'll give you a minute here to get that open. And now that you have that open, let's go ahead and select Open View, or Control O on the keyboard. And we're going to select our second floor plan. Select that and say OK. And now we can see we are at our second floor, and our elevation does show at 114'6". When we go to add our beams, we're going to go to the members page. And then inside of our steel section, we're going to drop this drawer down and select Add Beam. Let's start at the one between A1 and B1. We can see that is a W18 by 40. So I'm going to go ahead and type in W18 by 40. And just like we did with our column, we can just select our points. Now, again, we do want to make sure we are using the correct snap. If I had snapped or selected my exact point, that would snap either to the bottom or the top of the column, depending on which is closer. So just to show this, we don't want to do this, but when I select that, we can see when I hover at A and 1, our XYZ location here is showing that Z elevation at 126'0". Because we are at 114'6", and the exact point of that column is either at the bottom or the top, we know we can't get that to snap right at the correct elevation. So just make sure you're using intersection of construction lines. So again, we set the section size. We'll leave our connections at auto standard. And then we'll go from A1 to B1. Again, looking at our button bindings here at the bottom, we can see left click is for locate, right click return, and middle click is repeat. We can go in and repeat this at B1. I will middle click, and then we can actually go in and repeat this at AN3. They have been working, and notice that middle click is to pan. Well, in this case, since middle click is repeat, if I hold down my shift key, that then becomes pan. So now I can just middle click and drag. Again, I can middle click to repeat those. Now we have those 18 by 40s in here. Another tool we haven't looked at yet with our beam add is at the top we have what is our continuous add mode. So if I select that, that's just going to continue adding it from the last point selected. If I change my section size here from W1840 to 18 by 35, and with the continuous add mode on, go from A to B, we can see then it's asking me for my next point. So I could continue through adding it that way. In this case, I'm going to turn that off, and we can see I can go in and select my points now. The next box here is for launch member edit. If I check that on, and I add my beam at A3 to A2, that's our W21 by 44. So I'm going to change that, W21 by 44. Select my 2 points. It then brings up our beam edit window. This is similar to our column edit window, but it is slightly different. We can specify the section size, the steel grade, the sequence, depending on the material. It could specify the toe direction, the long leg, if it's double material, if that is centered, if it's a welded section in the single material. Is this marked for composite design? If so, what is our slab width and the number of studs? What is the beam rotation? Do we want to hold the rotations? Does this have a rolling operation? Do we want to swap member ends? Do we want this galvanized or do we want this broke apart? We can then go in and specify our end elevations, the web rotations, if we're adding a standard detail, and then our input connection type for our left and our right end. In this case, I'm not going to set any of that. So I'm just going to go ahead and say OK. And we can see it added that 21 by 44 in there. I'm going to go ahead and turn off our launch member edit. Before going any further, a couple things here is when we are adding a beam. I'm just going to select a point, and we don't have a beam here. I'm just doing this as an example. I'm going to select this point. Now if I go to the right, we can see that's showing at 25 foot 0. Well, let's say I only want a 10 foot beam in there. I can come in here and use what's called a typed dimension. I can just go 10-0, and we can see that it is selecting that point. I can then go in and snap to those different locations. You can see it snaps on 45s, the exact points, or the intersection of construction lines. If I knew a direct angle, I could go in and type in the @ symbol and type in 30 degrees, and now it's going to put that at 10 foot 0 long and at 30 degrees. So our type dimensions can be used with any member type that we are working with here. If I decide I don't want that, I can just hit the backspace and clear that out. We do have noticed points at 45-degree increments. So we can see it's just snapping to some random point here. That's because that intersection of construction line is meeting at 45 degrees. I can do the same down here and 45 degrees in each of the quadrants. The next thing to note here is the left end of the member. If I hover over this beam, we can see this little indicator here marking that as our left end. We can also see the piece mark and our member number are also on that left end. When I'm hovering over that, that will always be determined based on SDS2 when we're adding these members. Does not matter if we select the points right to left or left to right, SDS2 will automatically update those. Again, in the member edit window, if I edit this beam, we do have the checkbox for swap member ends. When I check this on and say OK, we can see the left end is now shown at B and 3. So it's on the right hand side of that member. I can always go back and swap member ends. Inside of this member edit window, if I do not want to see a section, for example, maybe I don't want to see my right end settings, if I select this on the left hand side in this tree, we can see that is now deselected here and is no longer shown on the right hand side of the screen. So I can always select that and expand that to show those settings. If I click this little plus arrow next to left end or right end settings, we can see the same stuff applies. Information, for example, is blank. Well, if I select that, we can see that then expands. You can use the tree on the left hand side to turn that on and off. When we were repeating our members, so when we repeated the W18x40s, for example, that will always be based on our left end. Just like we had with our columns, if we wish to delete a beam, we can either select that and hit the delete key, or we can select the delete icon here. Before we continue adding any more, we're going to talk a little bit about processing and creating of solids. Processing is done with any change that happens in the model. This applies to adding, deleting, or editing of members that require processing. The processing will only process other members in that small area of change. You can change how that processing works with our icons shown below our model tree here. If we wish to see our members here in solid instead of stick, there's a few different options we can do. To do this, we can go to our display, and then inside of display in the members section, we have some different tools here. If I drop this down, we have change all to solid opaque, change all to solid transparent main, or change all to solid transparent. And then the next one is change all to stick. So if I select this icon here for change all to solid opaque, we can see everything that I've added in here so far is now turned solid. This will only turn things that are in this current view to solid. So if we had a whole nother level above this and we select change all to solid, we would only see these members that are in this current view as solid. Again, I can just select the change all to stick again, and those all go back to their stick lines. I'm going to go ahead and keep adding some more of these members. So I'll do my beam add from our recent commands here. And we're going to add the next 21x44 that is running on grid line A. So I change my section size, and then I can go from 2 to 1 on grid line A. The next one I'm going to add is on grid line B, and those are both W18x35s. So I'll go from B3 to B2, and then I can middle click to repeat that from 2 to 1. And then I can change this to a W16x36 and go from C3 to C2, and then I can repeat that at C2 to go to C1. Can add in a W18x35 from C to D. So I'll select my 2 points after I change that section size, and I can repeat that on grid line 1 from C to D. And then the next is going to be our W16x26 at 1.9 from C to D. So again, I'll go 16x26, and then I'll go from C to D. And again, I can repeat that. And then our last 3 is going to be from 3 to 2.1 on grid line D, and that is a W14x43. So I'll go D to 2.1, and I can repeat that one from 1.9 to 1, so I'll just middle click at D and 1.9, and then the next is a W12x35, and I will select from 2.1 to 1.9. So I right clicked to complete the command, And we looked at the icon here, or I can just hit SA on the keyboard to turn those all to solid. Now this is not all of our beams yet, so let's go ahead and look at our W16 by 26s that are inside of that bay between C and D and 1.9 and 2.1. We can see it is calling that 3 foot from the left side of C, and then 2 foot between the two, and then 3 foot from the right hand side. So for this, what we're going to do, we're going to go back to our layout ribbon, and we're going to use our construction line add, and we're going to use the base construction line. So we need to make sure the base construction line snap is selected. And then we're going to grab the vertical running construction line that is on C. And I'm going to go 3-0 for that 3 foot and hit add plus. And then looking at this, we can see there's a 2 foot gap and then 8'6" and 3'0". So that is telling me that this is going to be the same or symmetrical to the opposite side. So we can see that is going to be 8'6". Hit add. And then I'll go 2'0", add, and then 8'6", and select add again. So now we have our construction lines in here. With those in there now, I'm going to go ahead and right click to complete the command. And I'm going to select our beam add again. Change our section size to a W16 by 26. And then I can go from the intersection to intersection. In this case, I cannot repeat that, because if I tried to repeat this here, that member would go up and to the right. So I just need to go in and select my points again. If I had wanted to, we could have gone in and added these without setting up any construction lines. When I am in my beam add command, we could have used our X, Y, and Z offsets. Again, I can hit SA to turn those to solid. And if I zoom in on that, we can see that went through the processing and generated the connections for us and set back and added the copes or clips for us. Looking in our display ribbon, let's take a look at some of these other options. So we looked at change all to solid opaque. Next, we had change all solid transparent main. So this is going to change everything to solid, and it's going to make our main material transparent. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. So we can see the main material. So all of our wide flanges are the main materials, are transparent or see-through, where everything else is then solid. So we can see this at some of our different connections, where the next option is change all to solid transparent. If I select that, we can see everything is then see-through. If I come over here, we can see through all of those materials and can see the bolts as if they were on top. And then we do have the option to change those all back to stick. If I only wanted to show a section of these members as solid, I can take a window or selection, select those members, and then I have a couple different options. I can just right click and go to our member styles and select solid opaque. And we can see it only changed that section. Or if I have those in stick again and select those, we can see I now have my display options where I could come in and turn those solid opaque that way as well. So either way I want to go about doing that will get us the same results. The next thing we're going to take a look at is some different selection and modeling tips. To add to this selection, where right now we have things selected, I'll hold down my shift key and we can see left click in our button binding now becomes select plus. So I can just select another member or I can window around multiple members, and that's going to add to that selection. If I want to remove from this current selection, if I hold my control key, I can just select that information I don't want to be included in that selection anymore. If I hold shift and control, we can see that now turns on toggle. So we can see it's selecting and deselecting things. If I zoom in here and I want to say, maybe I want to select this member. If I right click and go select other, that's going to allow me to select the material W38 or the member B33. However, if I right click over here and do the same thing and go select other, we can see that now brings in the material W38, the member B33, the left-in connection component of beam 34, the material A7, or the member B34. It then gives me an option to select all A7s or all W38s. Because my right click was over top of the beam, as well as the angle from this beam, that's why we got the selection we did. So you got to be careful when you are selecting so you know what is being added to. So if I have multiple things selected here, maybe I have these different members selected, and I want to add this material to my selection. If I right click on that and go select other and select material, that is going to add to the current selection. So looking at our selection boxes here, if I go from right to left, that's going to give us that dotted line, which means that it will select anything inside of this box as well as anything that the lines touch. So we can see it selects that full member. However, if I go left to right over this same section, that is only going to select what is completely inside of this selection box. So now we can see it's no longer selecting any of those beams, only just the column and the materials and holes within that bounding box. To zoom, scrolling the mouse in zooms in, and backwards zooms that out. It will always keep what is under the mouse under it while you zoom in or out. So if I want to see, for example, this section, when I zoom in, that is always going to be there. So if I wanted to look at this connection down here, we can always see that it will zoom about our mouse. Next we have our rotating. To rotate, again, I can hold down my shift key, and we can see middle click becomes rotate, and I can click and rotate about. We can see it gives us sort of an isometric view. If I hit SA, it turns everything in that view solid. And then I can go ahead and rotate back if I wanted. One thing to be careful with is I just rotated and then rotated back, and we can see our elevation here at the bottom is now showing at 121 foot 1 and 1/16. So we need to make sure when we are rotating that we are doing the correct rotation. So if I wanted to go back, I'm going to go ahead and select open view and reopen my second floor plan. We can see my elevation is back. So if I wanted to see a connection, for example, if I rotate but don't end the command and then go ahead and rotate back, we can see that stays at our 114 foot 6. If I rotate and then let go and I pan around a couple times and I want to get back to my plan view, there's two different ways we can go about this. If I hit U on the keyboard, that's going to undo my view changes and bring me right back to that. Or if I rotate a bunch with our icon inside of our layout, so I just hit the undo view change, and we can see that brings us back. Now let's say I'm working a bunch and I rotate about this a whole bunch of times and I don't want to have to hit U or select that icon a ton. I can use what is called revert view. It's either Control R on the keyboard or this icon here for revert. If I select that, that's just automatically going to open up whatever our last view opened was. When rotating, it's going to be very similar to our zooming. If we wanted to rotate about this column or see this column, we want to make sure we're hovering over that when we start the rotate command. So I can see, for example, like this material here, I can rotate about that. if I am zoomed in really close and I'm rotating out here in space, now I'm selecting some arbitrary point and I could get really lost really fast depending how zoomed in I am, where I just want to hover over where I'm wanting to rotate about. Again, I'll revert view using Control and R on the keyboard. And then the next tool we're going to take a look at is called Show and Hide Members. So if I have members selected, I can right click and select Hide Members. And we can see those members are hidden now. So I could continue working with whatever I wanted. Maybe I was looking at one of these connections and I could take a look closer there without those other members in the way. On the right hand side, we do see our hidden members listed in the model tree, just in a hidden members section. To bring those back, I can right click and select Show Members, and that's going to bring everything back. Or if I have those hidden, I can go to my display, and then in here I have my Show Members. So again, I can go in and hide those, or I have another option in my right click for Hide Unselected Members. So if I wanted to only see those that are selected, I could go Hide Unselected, and now we only see those. Again, I can just select that icon to bring all of that right back. If I would have closed out of the model and reopened, those members would all be shown again.